Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. Has anyone recommended financial services with high returns to you? Of course, it could also be recommending get-rich-quick business projects. When encountering such a situation, we need to remain calm, and we must do a good job of investigation and risk assessment, so as not to fall into a Ponzi scheme or be deceived into an MLM organization. So, what is a Ponzi scheme? Who masterminded the largest Ponzi scheme in history? How do we identify pyramid schemes? The Ponzi scheme is a fraud method, named after Ponzi, which originated from a series of scams carried out by Italian immigrant Charles Ponzi in the early 20th century. In the early 20th century, an Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi. A scam named after himself was launched in Boston, USA. At the same time, Ponzi is an eloquent and charismatic person. He initially used the international postage coupon transaction as a guise, claiming that he could quickly obtain high returns by conducting arbitrage operations in the international postage coupon market. He promised investors that if they invest a certain amount in a short period of time, they will reap huge profits within a few weeks. This promise quickly attracted a large number of investors, who poured their savings into Ponzi's plan. However, Ponzi's returns came not from actual investment activity, but from new investors' money. He used money from later investors to pay early investors back, creating a seemingly sustainable payoff. This reward model quickly expanded Ponzi's reputation and attracted more people to join. Ponzi's deceit continued for some time, and his wealth and popularity reached the peak. However, as more and more investors sought to redeem their investments, Ponzi could not maintain the payouts. Eventually, his deception was caught, leading to his breakdown and arrest. Ponzi became one of the most famous Ponzi schemes in history, and his name has become synonymous with such schemes, also known as Ponzi schemes. Ponzi schemes use high returns as bait and maintain operations by paying new investors the returns of earlier investors, rather than through actual profitable activity. Over time, this scam fails to pay returns for all investors, eventually leading to a crash. Ponzi schemes happen all over the world and cause countless people to suffer huge losses. By summarizing, we found that the operation of Ponzi schemes usually involves the following key steps. The first is false promises, where scammers usually lure investors with exaggerated promises of returns, claiming that they are making profits through some high-yield investment opportunity or business model. These promises often far exceed the normal return on investment, attracting a large number of investors. The second is to pay the promised high returns to the early investors, where the scammers will use the funds of the new investors to pay the returns to the early investors, which gives people the impression that the investment is successful and the returns are reliable. This payment method gives investors a false confidence and attracts more investment. At the same time, actively maintain existing investors and attract new investment. In order to maintain the operation of the scam, scammers need to constantly attract new investors to make their funds flow into the system. This is often accomplished through pyramid scheme-style solicitations, word of mouth, and the promise of higher returns. The last is the collapse and exposure of the entire system. Over time, the number of new investors cannot meet the return needs of early investors. When new investors dwindled, the scam eventually collapsed, failing to pay returns for all investors. At this time, the truth of the scam was exposed, and investors faced huge losses. It's not hard to see that Ponzi schemes also reveal how greed for high returns and the desire to get rich quick can be exploited. It also reminds people to be vigilant and to conduct adequate research and due diligence before investing or participating in any financial scheme to avoid falling victim to a scam. One of the biggest Ponzi schemes in history, besides Charles Ponzi's Ponzi scheme, was Bernard Madoff's Ponzi scheme. Madoff is the founder and chairman of Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities LLC, an American investment management company. He ran a decades-long Ponzi scheme through the firm, involving tens of billions of dollars in what became one of the largest Ponzi schemes in financial history. Madoff's Ponzi scheme originated in the early 1990s and lasted until 2008. He has attracted a large number of investors, including wealthy people, charities, banks, and other institutional investors, with a high-return strategy called Madoff Investment Strategy. He claims that his investment strategy is based on sophisticated hedging and speculative techniques and is able to achieve consistently high returns. However, in fact, Madoff did not carry out actual investment activities. His so-called investment strategy is just a disguise. It is actually a Ponzi scheme. He used new investors' money to pay early investors' returns, producing seemingly steady returns and high yields. This constant flow of funds gives investors confidence that their investments are safe and profitable. However, after the financial crisis of 2008, more and more investors tried to withdraw their funds, which led to the collapse of the Ponzi scheme. Madoff was unable to continue paying the returns and was eventually exposed in December 2008. He was arrested and charged with securities fraud, investor fraud, money laundering, and other charges. In 2010, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison and fined $65 billion. This Ponzi scheme has caused huge losses. According to the survey, investor losses reached $65 billion, including individual investors, institutional investors, and charities. Many people lost their savings, retirement, and investment funds. The case shocked the financial world and the global community, revealing gaps in the regulatory system and the vulnerability of investors. The Madoff case has had a profound impact on financial markets and regulators. It has sparked calls for reforms in financial regulation to strengthen regulators' scrutiny of investment firms and funds. Many countries have tightened registration and regulatory requirements for investment advisors and asset managers, and increased the enforcement capacity and resources of regulators. In addition, investor protection laws and regulations have been further improved to ensure that investors' rights and interests are effectively protected. The Madoff case also sparked a rethinking of the audit business. Auditing firms played a major role in the Madoff scam but failed to detect its existence. Therefore, regulatory agencies have also strengthened their regulatory requirements on audit companies, including strengthening audit quality control, increasing supervision and inspection of audit work, in order to improve the independence and accuracy of audit. Additionally, there have been some other significant Ponzi scheme cases such as Allen Stanford Ponzi scheme. Madoff was an American entrepreneur who ran a Ponzi scheme for 2 decades through his Stanford International Group. He orchestrated a bogus investment scheme that attracted thousands of investors and involved billions of dollars. In 2009, he was uncovered and charged with fraud and money laundering, for which he was eventually sentenced to 110 years in prison. Michael Milken Ponzi scheme. Milken was a Canadian businessman who ran a Ponzi scheme through fake investment funds. The Mike Milken Ponzi scheme is a major case in Canadian history. Mike Milken claims to be a successful investment manager and has attracted a large number of investors with his so-called high-return investment strategy. He claims to be able to obtain returns of up to 20% in a low-risk manner, and claims that his investment strategy is based on foreign exchange and futures markets. Milken showed false investment performance and high returns in advertisements and promotions, which attracted a large number of investors to invest in their funds. He showed investors fake account balances and investment returns to convince them they were getting a good return on their investments. However, in fact, Milken did not carry out substantive investment activities. He used funds from new investors to pay the returns of earlier investors to keep the Ponzi scheme semblance afloat. This constant flow of funds tricks investors into thinking their investments are increasing in value. However, when investors tried to withdraw their funds, Milken was unable to pay the returns. The Ponzi scheme eventually collapsed, and investors found themselves defrauded of their funds. According to estimates, Milken's Ponzi scheme involved hundreds of investors and lost millions of Canadian dollars. Milken was arrested in 2011 and charged with fraud and money laundering. In 2013, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison and a $5 million fine. The case revealed poor oversight by regulators and insufficient vigilance by investors, resulting in substantial financial losses for investors. These Ponzi scheme cases remind us that investors need to be vigilant and conduct adequate due diligence and risk assessment, carefully evaluate investment opportunities, pay attention to investor protection and compliance issues, and seek professional investment advice to avoid becoming victims of a Ponzi scheme. In addition to Ponzi schemes, the most influential scams in the financial field include pyramid schemes. So, what is the difference between pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes, and how to identify pyramid schemes? MLM is a business model that promotes and sells products or services through a multi-level distribution network. MLM companies usually have the main goal of recruiting downline salespeople and encourage them to earn rewards by selling products and recruiting more people. The income of MLM mainly comes from actual sales activities, and salespeople can earn commissions and incentives for selling products. However, there are some important differences between an MLM scheme and a Ponzi scheme. First, MLM organizations usually have actual products or services to sell that have some value. Salespeople can earn income by selling these products or services. However, Ponzi schemes often lack substantial commercial activities, and investors' returns mainly come from new investors' funds without actual investment or business operations. Secondly, the income of MLM mainly comes from actual sales activities, and the salesperson can get rewards through hard work and sales skills. Their income is based on the results of product sales. However, the rewards of a Ponzi scheme are paid to early investors by constantly attracting new investors, independent of the actual sales activity. So, how to identify an MLM organization? There are some key characteristics that can help people identify an MLM organization. The first is the emphasis on recruitment. MLM organizations often put too much emphasis on recruiting new members and encouraging existing members to reap the rewards by recruiting more people. They may see recruitment as a key to wealth and success, and promise high promises to recruits. They often claim to provide high income and returns, far exceeding the return on regular work or investment. Such inflated promises can be false and difficult to fulfill. The second is to ignore product value. MLM organizations may place too much emphasis on recruitment and returns, while ignoring the actual value of the product or service. They may emphasize the opportunity to sell rather than the product itself. At the same time, MLM organizations may require new members to purchase a certain amount of product or inventory, or to pay a membership fee. These requirements can put people in financial straits, and it's actually hard to make a sale in return. In addition, MLM organizations place an emphasis on relationships, often emphasizing teamwork and social networking, in an attempt to create close relationships among members. They will emphasize the close connection and mutual support among the members of the MLM organization, so as to attract more people to join. Additionally, MLM organizations often struggle to provide a consistent and stable source of income. It is difficult for most members to achieve high returns, and only a few top people can achieve real success in MLM organizations. This erratic revenue model is often a feature of MLM organizations. MLM organizations can also lack compliance, and there may be violations of the law. Several countries have regulations and regulatory bodies in place for MLMs to ensure their legality and compliance. If an organization is not legally compliant or transparent, that could be a red flag. Knowing these characteristics and being vigilant are key to identifying an MLM organization. If an opportunity puts too much emphasis on recruiting and returns, neglects the real value of the product or service, requires high upfront fees or inventory purchases, and lacks compliance, it is likely an MLM organization. Before considering joining any business opportunity, it is important to conduct adequate research and due diligence to ensure it is legitimate and sustainable. If you encounter a suspicious MLM organization, you should report it to the relevant local department to protect yourself and others from losses. I have finished explaining these two financial scams. What do you think about this? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. If you also like this channel, please subscribe us.